October 29, 2018, Soekarno Hatta International Airport, Jakarta, Indonesia. Lion Air Flight 610 is preparing for a domestic service to Pangkal Pinang, Indonesia. The aircraft operating the flight is a modern Boeing 737 MAX 8, registered as PKLKP. The plane leased from China Minsheng Investment Group, Aviation Capital, was delivered new to Lion Air on 13th August 2018. In 3 months of service, the flight had accumulated 895 flight hours and 443 takeoff landing cycles. The pilot in command is Captain Bhavya Suneja, a 31-year-old Indian national. He is flying with the airline for more than 7 years and has about 6,028 hours of flight experience. His co-pilot is Harvino, an Indonesian national. He has 5,174 hours of flying experience. Among the passengers are 20 Ministry of Finance employees, 10 Audit Board of Indonesia employees, 2 auditors from the Finance and Development Inspection Agency, 3 Ministry of Agency and Mineral Source of employees, 3 public attorneys, 3 Indonesian National Police officers, 6 Bangka Belitung Regional People Representative Council members, and 3 judges of Indonesia's High Court and National Court. In total, there are 38 civil servants, 3 police officers, and 10 state officers on board the flight. There are 2 foreigners among those on board, the pilot from India and an Italian citizen, a former professional cyclist. There are 6 flight attendants on board, all Indonesian nationals. Lion Air Flight 610 lines up on runway 25 at 6:18 local time. The flight crew then performs the before takeoff checklist. At 6:18, the Jakarta Tower Controller issues takeoff clearance for Flight 610. The first officer acknowledges, and a few seconds later, the takeoff go-around button is pressed and the engines pull up to takeoff thrust. The captain is the pilot flying while the first officer is the pilot monitoring. At 6:20, the first officer calls 80 knots. At this time, the airspeed indicator on the captain's primary flight display indicates 79 knots, while the first officer's PFD indicates 81 knots. Also during takeoff, the DFTR records a difference between left and right angle of attack of about 20 degrees. At 6:20, the flight officer called rotate, and 2 seconds later, as the nose gear lifts off the runway, the left control column stick shaker activates. The first officer advises the captain of indicated airspeed disagree. The left indicated airspeed is 164 knots, while the right IAS is 173 knots. At this point, the first officer questions what is the aircraft problem and asks whether the captain intends to return to the airport. The captain doesn't respond to the first officer question and doesn't provide acknowledgement. At 6:21, the Jakarta Tower Controls instructs the flight crew to contact the Terminal East controller. 19 seconds later, the first officer makes initial contact with the TE controller, who responds that the aircraft is identified on the controller aircraft situational display. Thereafter, the TE controller instructs the flight to climb to flight level 270. In their communications with air traffic controller, the flight crew asks the controller to confirm the altitude of the aircraft and later also asks the speed as shown on the controller radar wrist display. At 6:21, the first officer asks the TE controller to confirm altitude as shown on the TE controller radar display. The TE controller responds that the aircraft altitude is 900 feet. However, the captain's PFD indicates 790 feet and the first officer PFD indicates 1040 feet. The flight takes off in a westward direction before circling around to a northeast heading, following the standard instrument departure of Abasa 1C. At 6:21, the aircraft starts turning left. Seconds later, the first officer requests clearance from the TE controller to fly to a holding point and reports experiencing a flight control problem. At 6:22, the first officer moves the flap handle from 5 degrees to 1 degree and flaps retraction begins. 20 seconds later, The first officer suggests to the captain to continue the flaps reconfiguration, and the captain agrees. As the flaps reach the fully retracted position, the automatic aircraft nose down trim activates for about 10 seconds. Suddenly, the aircraft is tilted down. The rate of descent increases up to 3,200 feet per minute. During the automatic aircraft nose down motion to counteract the tilt, the captain command aircraft nose up trim and they re-establish a positive climb. Also, the captain instructs the first officer to select flaps 1 degree. Then the low airspeed warning sound. Since the speed readings on the captain's and first officer's PFD are unreliable, the first officer asks the controller of the speed as indicated on the radar display. Meanwhile, the captain advises the ATC controller that the altitude of the aircraft cannot be determined due to all aircraft instruments indicating different altitudes. Eventually, at 6:31, MCAS activates again. The pitch trim changes to 0.3 units and the 737 begins pitching down. Communication between air traffic controller and Flight 610 was suddenly lost at 6:32. NTSC investigators learned that the same aircraft was used on a flight from Bali to Jakarta the night before the crash. Detailed reports from the flight revealed that the aircraft had suffered a serious incident which left many passengers traumatized. The aircraft's maintenance logbook revealed that the plane suffered unspecified navigation failure on the captain's side, while the first officer's side was reported to be in good condition. While the aircraft was en route to Jakarta, it had problems maintaining a constant altitude, with passengers stating that it was like a roller coaster ride. The CEO of Line Air said that the aircraft had a technical issue on Sunday night, but this had been addressed in accordance with maintenance manuals issued by the manufacturer. On 7 November, the NTSC confirmed that there had been problems with Flight 610's angle of attack sensor. After airspeed and altitude problems, an angle of attack sensor was replaced and tested 2 days earlier on the aircraft accident. Erroneous airspeed indicators were still present on the subsequent flight on 28 October, which experienced automatic nose-down trim. Shortly after takeoff from Jakarta on 29 October, issues involving altitude and airspeed continued due to erroneous angle of attack data and commanded automatic nose-down trim via the maneuvering characteristics augmentation system, that is MCAS. MCAS takes reading from a single angle of attack sensor that determines how much the plane's nose is pointing up or down related to oncoming airflow. When MCAS detects that the plane is pointing up at a dangerous angle, it can automatically push down the nose of the 737 in an effort to prevent the aircraft from stalling. When the company designed the Boeing 737 MAX, it made the engines larger to increase fuel efficiency and positioned them slightly forward and higher up on the plane's wings. This de-established the aircraft pitching and higher angle of attacks. To compensate, Boeing greatly added a new system called MCAS to prevent the 737's nose from getting too high and causing a stall. However, a malfunction in the angle of attack sensors could lead the MCAS system to believe that the aircraft is stalling when it isn't, causing it to dip the aircraft nose down to recover from a non-extant stall even in flight level. In the final report, investigators claimed that the replacement of the angle of attack sensors installed on the airplane had been miscalibrated by engineers and that the angle of attack disagree alert was not correctly enabled during the development of 737 MAX. Pilot error was also listed as a cause of the crash in the final report.